Sometimes in order to feel bigger than we've ever felt, to grow into our potential, we have to feel small and insignificant. And what do I mean by this? Because in many ways it sounds counterintuitive. No one wants to feel less than. No one wants to feel insignificant. But it's in positioning ourselves to feel that we understand the walls we place around ourselves. We understand how big life is and us, while we're here on planet Earth, walking around, navigating our day-to-day lives. We are but raindrops in a thunderstorm. We are a snap. And I think understanding that we are a pawn on the chessboard of life, we are a cog in a wheel, it allows us to take some of that pressure off and free ourselves up to be our beautiful, authentic, powerful selves. Life is a game. It's an opportunity. It's abundance. Yet we default to, well, I don't want to screw up. I don't want to lose what I have. I don't want to make mistakes. And that's the wrong way to look at life. The other day I was at the Grand Canyon, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but for those who aren't, it's one of the most beautiful, magnificent, almost hard to comprehend, just incredible landscapes I've ever seen. It goes on forever. It's breathtaking. It's almost like as you're standing on the edge of that cliff looking out at forever, at infinity, you realize how small the corner of life you live in is compared to this. You realize how big and grandiose the world is, and by the way, the Grand Canyon is just a small part of it. Yet, we are often confined to four walls. It just makes you realize how small we tend to think, how we box ourselves in, how we limit our potential just by stepping out and looking at the sheer magnitude of this landscape. Which, by the way, would swallow you up and continue moving on as if nothing happened. It screams of your insignificance. Now again, you might think, well, that's negative. I don't want to feel insignificant. No, insignificance in its own unique way is freedom. It's freedom to make the move. It's freedom to try things. It's freedom to take those steps you've always wanted to take, because why not? Because at the end of the day, the clock is going to run out. There's no escaping that. Right? The phrase goes, the thing about life is no one makes it out alive. And when you think of yourself as sort of high and mighty or avoiding the wrong things, trying not to break things, you miss out. The beauty of being a raindrop in a thunderstorm is there's flexibility, there's freedom. No one's looking at you, no one's pointing and waiting for you to mess up. These are things that we create in our own minds about ourselves. These are stories and narratives we write about why we shouldn't. But when you're on the ledge or the edge of that cliff looking out, you realize maybe things don't matter that much. And maybe that is a beautiful thing. Because maybe that's your reason to try the craft, start the journey, make the call. Maybe that's your rationale for looking around and going, I've been standing here too long. I've built walls around myself. I've confined myself to a world that is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what's out there. We are small. And the only mistake you can make is to not go and not try. That trip was incredible for me. I want to say it was life-changing because it was a reset in a way. It was you're taking yourself too seriously. You're holding on to what is instead of opening your wings and attacking what can be. Don't ask why, ask why not. The universe is infinite, and we're lucky enough in this moment to play a very small part. As is said in the Dead Poets Society, we get to write a verse in the great play of life. So stop thinking about ourselves, or we should stop thinking about ourselves as self-important, and instead cherish the freedom and the opportunity. Because we'll be gone in the blink of an eye, and that Grand Canyon will still be there. The sun will still rise. The stars will still be out there in the night sky. The question is, will we capture that moment? Will we do something beautiful with it? You can, you're able to, but will you? That's the question I have for you today. Greatness starts small. It's born from the preparation, the rest, the recovery. It's giving yourself the tools to be the best version of you. Unlocking the excellence that was there, waiting to emerge the whole time. Greatness is allowing those little things to become the big things. Pro-compression. Elevate your performance. Today is not like any day I've lived before. And why should it be? This very second, there are roads to be explored that I've never before walked down. There are actions to take that I've never before taken, and ideas to bring to life that I've never before given the respect they deserve. That's saying, my golden rule, you are always one decision away from a totally different life. You are always one realization from pulling the lever, opening the door, finding the answer you've been walking by all your life. The problem is you don't see today as today. You see it as a continuation of yesterday. The same movie with the same characters and same rules, without even realizing you need to change the script. Emerson said, write it on your heart that every day is the best day in the year. Why? Because it can be. Your job is to remember that things will continue on and on and on until we give them an end. We must manually close the book on yesterday's story and start anew, because we can. We often don't realize, but we can. And that is why the morning, each new day is so precious. It's taking the mistakes and sometimes disappointments of yesterday and transforming them into today's lessons and the opportunity to begin again. A new journey seen through a new lens, walked through a new pair of shoes, a new sense of self. So here is your reminder that the words were and are, they're very different. That's why each sunrise transcribes into the sky the hopes and dreams of the you that you've always wanted to be. It's not a crazy formula or some secret code. It's simply untying your boat from the harbor that is yesterday and moving towards tomorrow's horizon. So the other day, I had a moment. I was walking out of Walgreens, just grabbed some stuff, was moving through the parking lot, and I paused for a brief second and just looked at my car. Now, a little bit of a preface here so that you know I'm coming from the right place, right? I think those of you who've been listening to me for a while, you know, I really don't delve into like money or material things, not because I think they're bad, right? Or because I don't like them. Money is great, it makes life a lot easier, but more so because they're not really what lights me up, right? And in fact, I think they're a byproduct of the important things, right? It's like if you do the important things right, then the money usually follows. And so I like to spend my time talking about the quote-unquote important things. But for the first time, I spent a little bit of money on my car. I'd been investing everything back into the business for about 10 years now. And the convo with myself went like this: Eddie, you're in your mid-30s. When are you going to live a little bit, right? It's like, what are you saving for? And so I did. And back to the moment, I'm standing there in that Walgreens parking lot looking at the car, and something dawned on me. And I think this is where the magic is. 10 years ago, I was worried about rent, right? I had very little other than a laptop and an old dynamic microphone that I would take with me into bars, you know, when I was playing my set with my acoustic guitar. And it's like, think about what you flipped that mic into. Because that little mic was your starting point. And here's, where I think the value is. You can take that little mic and see it as a piece of equipment, an amplifier of your voice, something used to record, a tool, right? Or you can see it as a portal to the universe, as something that can transform your reality as you currently know it. That mic was flipped into a recorded speech. My recorded speeches were flipped into a YouTube channel and a brand. The YouTube channel evolved into speaking opportunities. The speaking opportunities evolved into creating a supporting staff, placing incredible people around me. Right? Those people, that team has helped me create scale and reach hundreds of thousands of people every day, and on and on and on. And from that continued evolution, right, that continued leveling up, comes the car that I'm staring at in that parking lot, a reminder of where I started. I can draw a direct line from that cheap dynamic mic that you'd have to hit against the table to get to work, to turn on, to that moment in the parking lot. Growth is seeing value where you are and trading up. It's looking around you and seeing not what is, but what all that can become. See, I've used this metaphor before, but I think it applies perfectly here, right? Fantasy baseball. I'm gonna nerd out on you. Right? After college, my friends and I, played for a few years to keep in touch. And believe it or not, I learned a ton from it. So in a nutshell, this is how you win. You see the value where you are. Value that hopefully your opponents do not see, right? You find that value, you highlight it, and ultimately you trade up. Every player is an opportunity. A little dynamic microphone. Right? The question is, can you turn each one into your dream car? Right? So, quick example, player on your team is wildly overperforming. Right? This person hit 8 home runs in 2 weeks, but you know, this guy isn't a home run guy. He has a 9-year track record of not really hitting home runs. So sure, there's a chance that he suddenly improved. Possible. But more than likely it's an outlier, right? So you seize the opportunity. You shop the guy to everyone around you while his value's high. You try and trade him. See if you can get 3 players for him that are currently underperforming, right? Squeeze the value from the moment. Take what's around you and trade up. And I won't go too far down the road on that example because I know how niche it is, but I want the concept to be clear. There's always an opportunity around you to identify value and transform it into the next stair of the staircase. It's always there. What you need is always around you. We just don't recognize it. We forget to look. I heard Gary Vee say years ago, or posed the question years ago, what is the ROI of a basketball? Gary said, well, for me, it's not very much, right? I'm a pretty short guy. I'm not a basketball player. What's the ROI or the value of a basketball to LeBron James? Literally billions of dollars. Right? But what's the value or ROI of a piano to LeBron? Not much. Right? What is it to Alicia Keys? Again, a lot. Right? And so in our own world, it's looking around and identifying what those things are and attacking them, capitalizing on them, right? The mic, the basketball, or the piano. Maybe in your world, it's Microsoft Word, it's a paintbrush, it's the gym, right? Could be an infinite number of things. But can you see it as not just minor detail in the great play of your life, but as your ticket to a reality you dream of? Microsoft Word becomes where you tell your stories, which becomes your vehicle to connect with an audience, which becomes your incentive to write a book, which brings you to a speaking tour, on and on. Like, you get the idea. It's trading up from the little fragments of value that surround you. Because if you can recognize them and give them the respect they deserve, you'll see transformation happen. That little mic and the courage to pick it up drove me home from Walgreens that day. It's the reason I'll be speaking in multiple countries over the next few weeks. It's the reason I get to share stories and pour into others with the hope that they do the same in their world. Look around you. There is value. But the question remains the same, right? Are you willing to, 1, identify it, and 2, capitalize on it? Because a future you, walking out of Walgreens in a few years, will be grateful that you did. I've always been amazed at how much life can change with a small perspective shift. You hear something the right way, maybe even something you've heard, 1,000 times. This time you just hear it differently, and suddenly the light bulb goes off. Suddenly, it all makes sense. I was talking to one of my friends recently about how he threw discus in high school, and he was incredible at the sport, but for, a long stretch, he was inconsistent with his release. And coach after coach after coach would try and help him with it, but it wasn't until one said to him, hey, instead of sprinting to the release, think of it as a scissor motion. Right now, I don't know much about discus, but for whatever reason, that clicked for him. The gears started turning, he went to states, had the best performance of his life. All because he looked at the same situation through a different lens. He found clarity in what was around him. Now you might be thinking, what does that have to do with me? Well, I'm of the thinking that in our own lives, right, the battles we are all individually fighting, the struggles we are going through, amidst that storm, we are one little light bulb moment from the clarity we need to re-engage, to create momentum. We're never as far from what we need as we think. But what we do is we convolute things. We tell ourselves that, the change required is monumental. It's some larger than life transition. You look at my friend, the difference between a good season and an amazing season, it wasn't a year in the weight room away. No, it was a small mental shift. And even in your world, if the shift is just the beginning, great. Everything of substance does in fact have to start. And it's arriving at that point, giving yourself the gift of clarity in a pursuit that becomes critical. I've always visualized that epiphany as me sitting in a dark room, pitch black, which is intimidating, it's intense, feels, even helpless at times, but understanding there is always a light switch an arm's reach away. There's always the thing that will be transformative. We just have to keep reaching, keep stretching, keep feeling around for it because it exists. And with an outstretched arm, the very thing necessary to get us out of the dark and into the light is waiting. And that's just it. We can't conflate the goal with the delta between where we stand now and the goal. No one can run a marathon in one giant step. It doesn't matter how strong you are, you're not leaping the course and diving through the finish tape. No, you're running thousands and thousands of little manageable steps. But we come face to face with situations in life where we know the finish line, whatever it is in your particular case, is way out there in the distance. And it's overwhelming, it's intimidating, it places us back in that dark room where we're surrounded by the unknown and inundated with stories we tell ourselves about how difficult life is. This is where you need to reach out and look for the light switch. It's where you need to remember you're not responsible for the finish line, because how could you be? Humans are only capable of moving forward one step at a time. It's where you have to understand that the greatest impact on the discus right now is a change to your release point, a perspective shift, something minimal that gets you the distance. Every time I've been stuck or lost, it has been an adjustment to the way I'm looking at the world around me that's ultimately made the difference. A little reminder to take the pressure off. At least in the sense that we can only control what we can control. And usually that's the step right in front of us. So my suggestion is to stop looking up at the mountain and look down at the very next step. Because from where you stand, there is a path to get you there. But the process calls for you to, 1, believe it's possible, and 2, make the little adjustment in real time that will put you in position to do just that. You're never down and out. Not so long as there's air in your lungs and blood pumping through your veins. You are, rather, one decision away, one epiphany away, one flick of the light switch away from recapturing momentum and finding yourself again. I remember running one day. This was years ago now. I lived a little bit further south, was jogging down the Hollywood Beach Boardwalk. And that particular day happened to be a struggle. I think I just underestimated the heat and, felt beat up on my way back. But as I was passing all these people who were walking on the boardwalk, some going to the beach, some were going to get food, everyone was kind of doing their thing, I just remember thinking how funny it was that in that, that 1 second glance that happens between two people as they pass one another, that no one I was passing knew how awful I felt. And they'd never know. It felt odd to me that so much hurt could be hidden in plain sight. Not that in a million years I'd want them to know or they needed to know, but it's the idea that this bridge between their world and mine would never be crossed, that my little hell was a secret the Hollywood Boardwalk would keep forever. In a way, it's kind of crazy to think about. How someone can be going through their own struggle, and it's never apparent to passersby. Right? Think about that. The vast majority of chaos on planet Earth, it goes unseen. Everyone's just kind of carrying around their own invisible burdens. That Hollywood Boardwalk probably keeps more secrets than I can comprehend. And I've talked about this before, how over time, one of my biggest mental shifts was detaching from this notion that everyone has it all figured out and I'm the one stumbling through. Everyone else jumps out of bed, excited, screaming, "Let's go world, let's do this," right? Well, I dealt with my unease and my concerns. And that's just wrong, right? Yeah, there's certainly variability in everyone's problems. We're not all the same. But everyone is climbing their own mountain. Everyone has their own cross to bear. I remember a quote from Viktor Frankl. He said, "To draw an analogy, a man's suffering is similar to the behavior of a gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into an empty chamber, it will fill the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Thus, suffering completely fills the human soul and conscious mind, no matter whether the suffering is great or little. Therefore, the size of human suffering is absolutely relative." Eye-opening message. Relative and felt by all. See, there's two things I take from this. First, and probably the most obvious, I think it calls for us to be more compassionate to others, at least as much as we can. I've fallen short here plenty of times, we all do, but it reminds us that it should be a North Star. And two, there's a pragmatic element here, signifying that very rarely is what goes on around us about us. Very rarely is it personal. Because often our first instinct is to assign intentionality to things that happen around us. How could this happen to me? How could they do this to me? And in truth, it's just not about you. Again, the deepest, most complex aspects of human beings are invisible to everyone but the person they're happening to. Everyone is, to some extent, running down their own boardwalk on a hot summer day. So going back to that example, let's make up a scenario. Let's say I clumsily bumped into someone, ran too close to them. They could think jerk. They could think get in your lane. They could think pay attention, have some respect, I'm walking here. But would that situation be the product of my disrespect? Or would it be the fact that I'm exhausted, that I'm hot, that I'm dehydrated and only counting steps in my head? Buildings could have been collapsing around me and I would have had no idea. I'm focused on making it through. See, there's value in understanding this. So much value. The world is not working against you. It's comprised of 8 billion souls with different movies playing in their heads, and you can get more from it when you understand that. You can be more valuable when you understand that. You can give yourself more grace when you understand that. People cannot see your pain and you can't see theirs. But it is a shackle being removed to take life's events less personally, less seriously even. As you create something beautiful in your own world, understand that there are no true adversaries. I remember reading in the Four Agreements a while back, and this is kind of a sloppy paraphrasing, but people don't do things because of you. They do things because of themselves. And so, as you run your race, as you make your way into the world, understand that everything around you is assigned value by you. And those passers-by aren't for or against you. They are in the midst of various personal journeys, trying to run their own races, as are you. Look, the sun is hot. That humidity can be suffocating. The path laid out before you is long. These are tough obstacles that you have to overcome, that we all have to overcome. And in time you will. But don't create additional adversaries that do not exist. Don't imprison yourself with stories that don't hold up. It's not all about you. And understanding that, as it turns out, can be what makes all the difference. Why chase down the difficult things? It's certainly not being productive for the sake of being productive. It's not for the flex or the trophies. It's because meaning in life is directly tied to conquering the unconquerable, harnessing the outside world. It's about seeing what we can become when we put ourselves in position to grow. The adventure of a lifetime that awaits anyone who chooses to accept. That's why. But it's not a one and done affair. That's the thing. Life has a way of filtering out the timid and the unsure to identify those that really want it. As though it sees us sign that dotted line and asks, is that so? Let me remove that comfort and predictability, see if then it still sounds good. Let me place the value on the other side of the pain. See if you're still enthusiastic about the pursuit. In fact, let me burn the map, dim the lights, add some obstacles along the way. See how giddy you are about all this now. And see the difference between those who make change and those who dream about change. It comes down to one simple thing. How do you view the obstacles? Are they a problem? Are they an anomaly, a red flag? Because if they are, you've lost before you started. But the ones who see adversity as simply the expectation, the water that grows the seed, the wheel that turns the car, the switch that lights up the room, well, for them, it's a little different. They have armed themselves with adaptability. See, life is not smooth sailing with aberrations in the form of rough waters. No, it is a non-stop influx of trials and tribulations. You can't be mentally prepared to evolve if your expectation and your hope is always for calm. No, flip that on its head. The expectation is turbulence. Calm is a rare gift, and as it turns out, you were built to endure. So when the waters are rough and the many turn back, you push forward. Because this is not the world saying no. It's certainly not a referendum on you. It's the cost of admission. A chance for you to prove yet again that where you place your focus, you emerge victorious. If only the world could see, could understand that the challenge isn't the problem, it's the answer. If only everyone knew what you know. That the great tragedy isn't falling down, it's avoiding discomfort in order to preserve what? Mediocrity. Why do you want this? Because you know it's an option. It's there. You know that if you move forward when you're fearful, push harder when it hurts, find something in yourself when there appears to be nothing left, the game of life becomes one of unending reward, beauty, and prosperity. For those few, it's simply knowing that you can have the world if you just give yourself permission to take it.